March 15, 2019. Colonel Marcus Rivera had been hunting El Chapo's tunnels for 3 years. The man who'd sworn to seal every crack in America's southern defense. That's exactly why he never expected to find his father's name in the cartel's payment ledger. 200 feet below the Rio Grande, Rivera's team breached the tunnel's command center and found the encrypted drives. Standard protocol called for immediate evidence transfer to federal authorities. Instead, Marcus opened the files himself. What he discovered in the next 60 minutes shattered everything he believed about his family. The Pentagon held emergency meetings because of it. And for the next 5 years, when people talked about the Rivera name, they always came back to this moment. The moment Marcus Rivera learned his war was built on lies. The moment America's border guardian discovered he'd been protecting the very corruption that killed his brother. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The hook. The hard drive's blue light pulsed in the darkness like a digital heartbeat. Marcus Rivera's hands trembled as he scrolled through financial records dating back 20 years. Each entry told a story of systematic betrayal. Border Patrol schedules sold, tunnel locations protected, entire convoys waved through checkpoints without inspection. And there, buried in a subfolder marked Legacy Assets, was his father's code name, El Guardian. Captain Roberto Rivera, 28 years of distinguished service, Congressional Medal of Honor recipient. The man who'd taught Marcus that the border was sacred ground, that every foot of it mattered because American lives hung in the balance. The same man who'd been taking cartel money since 1999. Marcus's radio crackled. "Colonel, we need you topside. Border Patrol's asking questions about our jurisdiction down here." 5 more minutes, Marcus whispered, his voice barely audible in the tunnel's oppressive silence. He clicked deeper into the files. Transaction after transaction, each one precisely documented with dates, amounts, and operational details. The cartel kept better records than most Fortune 500 companies. They had to. When you're moving $2 billion annually through a network spanning 3 countries, accountability matters. But it was the final folder that stopped his breathing entirely. Tijuana Cleanup, 2004, the year Diego died. Marcus opened the file with shaking fingers. The first document was a personnel assessment, written in clinical Spanish, subject Diego Rivera, Border Patrol agent. Status, compromised. Recommendation, immediate neutralization. The assessment was signed by someone Caladel Contador, the accountant. But below that signature was a handwritten note in English. Handle this delicately. Family connection requires special consideration. E.g., El Guardian, his father. The next document was an operational report dated 3 days before Diego's death. It detailed his brother's investigation into suspicious checkpoint activities, his growing suspicions about inside information leaks, and his plan to present evidence to internal affairs. Evidence that would have exposed El Guardian's 20-year partnership with El Chapo's organization. The final document was a death certificate. Cause of death: vehicular accident during high-speed pursuit. But attached to it was a payment voucher for $50,000, marked family funeral expenses, courtesy payment. The cartel had paid for Diego's funeral. His father had accepted blood money to bury the son whose death he'd orchestrated. Marcus slammed the laptop shut, the sound echoing through the tunnel like a gunshot. For 15 years, he'd carried the guilt of not being there when Diego needed him. 15 years of believing his brother died because Marcus was too focused on his military career to answer a phone call, too ambitious to recognize a cry for help. But Diego hadn't needed his protection from cartel hitmen. He'd needed protection from their own father. "Colonel Rivera," the radio barked again, more urgently. "Sir, we've got federal marshals en route. They're demanding immediate access to any materials recovered from the site." Marcus stared at the drives scattered around the makeshift command center. 20 years of evidence, hundreds of compromised operations, thousands of lives lost because someone on the American side was feeding intelligence to the enemy. And at the center of it all was the man whose funeral he'd spoken at just 2 years ago. The man he'd eulogized as a hero, a patriot, a father who'd dedicated his life to protecting the homeland. Roberto Rivera's memorial plaque sat in Sunset Park, just 3 blocks from where Marcus now stood. The inscription read, "A guardian of freedom who never wavered in his duty." The city had named a street after him. The Border Patrol had established a scholarship in his honor. All of it built on a foundation of blood and lies. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from his wife. Saw the tunnel raid on the news. Stay safe. Love you. Below that was a photo of their 8-year-old daughter Sophia in her soccer uniform, holding up a sign that read, "My dad is a hero. Heroes don't cover up the truth. Heroes don't protect the legacy of traitors, even when those traitors share their blood. But heroes also don't destroy innocent families to satisfy their own need for justice." The sound of boots echoed from the tunnel entrance above. Federal agents, coming to collect evidence that would either expose the greatest border security breach in American history or disappear forever into classified files that no one would ever see. Marcus had maybe 60 seconds to decide. He could hand over the drives and let the investigation follow wherever it led. Justice for Diego, accountability for the system, consequences for everyone who'd enabled 20 years of corruption, including his dead father's reputation and his living family's future. Or he could claim the drives were corrupted, buy himself time to find another way. Protect Sophia from learning her grandfather was a traitor, shield his mother from discovering her husband's betrayal, preserve the Rivera name while he figured out how to dismantle the network without destroying everyone he loved. The boots were getting closer. Marcus reached for the hard drives, his decision crystallizing with each approaching footstep. Some choices define a man forever. This was one of them. Want to know what choice Marcus makes when the federal agents arrive? Subscribe now, because tomorrow's chapter reveals the devastating confrontation that changes everything. Plus, I'll share the real-life tunnel discovery that inspired this story. Don't miss it. Introduction. The hard drives felt heavier than they should have as Marcus slipped them into his tactical vest, their weight settling against his ribs like stones in a grave. 60 seconds had become 30, 20. The footsteps above grew louder, more urgent, accompanied by the sharp crackle of radio chatter echoing down through the tunnel's mouth. "Sir?" Sergeant Rodriguez appeared at the bottom of the ladder, her young face tight with concern. "The federal team is requesting immediate access to all recovered materials." Marcus looked at Rodriguez, 26 years old, El Paso born and raised, the kind of soldier who still believed the system worked when good people ran it. Her father had served under Roberto Rivera back in the day, had spoken at Marcus's retirement ceremony about the honor of following in El Guardian's footsteps. If Rodriguez knew what those footsteps really led to, it would break something fundamental inside her. The same something that had shattered in Marcus 15 minutes ago and was still cutting him from the inside. "Tell them I'll be right up," Marcus said, his voice steadier than he felt. "Just securing the scene." Rodriguez nodded and disappeared back up the ladder. Marcus was alone again in the tunnel that had already become a tomb for everything he'd believed about his family, his legacy, his father's memory. The tunnel itself was a masterpiece of criminal engineering. 40 feet underground, reinforced concrete walls, LED lighting powered by a generator system that could run for weeks, air filtration that kept the atmosphere clean enough for extended operations. The cartel had invested millions in this single passage, and it had been operational for at least 5 years based on the wear patterns Marcus could see. 5 years of drugs, weapons, and human trafficking, flowing directly beneath the memorial park where Diego was buried. His brother's grave was maybe 200 feet above this spot. Marcus had walked that path every year on the anniversary of Diego's death, carrying flowers and guilt in equal measure. The irony was so cruel it felt intentional. Marcus ran his fingers along the tunnel wall, feeling the rough concrete that had been poured while he was deployed in Afghanistan, building his military career while the cartel built their highway to hell beneath his hometown. The wall was cool against his palm, solid and permanent, like his father's reputation had seemed just an hour ago. His phone buzzed again. Another message from Elena. "Mom's making your favorite tonight. Bring your appetite home." The photo attached showed Sophia helping her grandmother roll tamales in the kitchen of the house where Marcus had grown up, the same kitchen where his father had counted cartel money while Marcus did homework at the table. Every memory was poisoned now. Every family dinner, every bedtime story, every moment of pride in carrying the Rivera name, all of it built on blood money and betrayal. How many times had his father come home from protecting the border when he'd actually been coordinating with the very people destroying communities like theirs? And Diego. God, Diego had figured it out. His little brother, always the idealist, always believing that right and wrong were distinct choices rather than the muddy compromises that Marcus had learned to navigate in the military. Diego had discovered their father's betrayal and tried to do the right thing, the heroic thing. It had gotten him killed by the man who'd taught them both that family came first. Marcus closed his eyes and let himself remember Diego as he really was. Not the idealized saint that grief had created, but the stubborn, principled, occasionally infuriating younger brother who'd called Marcus out every time he cut corners or made excuses. Diego would have handed over those drives without hesitation, consequences be damned. Family honor meant nothing if the family itself was rotten. But Diego hadn't had an 8-year-old daughter who thought her grandfather was a hero. He hadn't had a wife whose family respected the Rivera name, or a mother whose entire identity was built around being Roberto Rivera's widow. The sound of voices echoed from above, federal agents growing impatient, demanding access to evidence that could unravel 20 years of corruption and destroy every innocent person who'd been unlucky enough to love Roberto Rivera. Marcus pulled out his phone and looked at Sophia's photo again. She had Roberto's eyes, the same dark intensity that had made him such an effective Border Patrol agent. In the photo, she was wearing the medal her grandfather had given her before he died, a junior Border Patrol badge that he'd had specially made for her 5th birthday. "Someday, mija," Roberto had told her, "you'll understand what it means to protect home." Now Marcus understood what his father had really meant. Protecting home wasn't about the border or the country or abstract ideals about justice. It was about the people you loved, the ones who looked at you like you were their whole world, the ones who would be destroyed if they learned the truth about who you really were. The voices above were getting louder, more insistent. Marcus took a deep breath and started toward the ladder, the hard drive secure in his vest, his decision made. Some truths were too dangerous to tell, some justice too costly to pursue. Some lies were the only way to protect the people who mattered most. Marcus climbed the ladder one rung at a time, each step carrying him further from the truth and deeper into a lie he wasn't sure he could sustain. The hard drives pressed against his chest like accusations, their weight multiplying with every breath. Above ground, the desert sun felt obscene after the tunnel's darkness. Too bright, too clean for what he now carried. Colonel Rivera. Special Agent Sarah Chen stepped forward, her FBI windbreaker crisp despite the El Paso heat. "We need to debrief immediately. What did you recover down there?" Marcus met her gaze steadily, calling on 26 years of military training to keep his expression neutral. Structural diagrams, some basic operational notes. Nothing actionable. The real intelligence was destroyed before we breached. It was his first conscious lie about the drives, and it came easier than he'd expected. The words felt familiar, practiced, as if he'd been rehearsing this betrayal his entire life. Chen's eyes narrowed. "We'll need to examine everything personally. Chain of custody requirements?" "Of course." Marcus gestured toward a tactical case near the command vehicle. "It's all documented and secured. Rodriguez has the inventory." He watched Chen walk away, already planning how he'd doctor the inventory later, how he'd make the lies look like protocol. His father's son, learning to cover tracks with the same methodical precision Roberto had used to hide 20 years of treason. The thought should have disgusted him. Instead, it felt like inheritance. Marcus's radio crackled with routine operational chatter, perimeter reports, evidence cataloging, coordination with Border Patrol units. The familiar rhythm of command should have been comforting, but every word now sounded different, filtered through the knowledge that similar conversations had been monitored, recorded, and sold to the highest bidder for decades. How many operations had been compromised because someone like his father was feeding intelligence to the cartels? How many agents had walked into ambushes because their trust had been weaponized against them? His phone rang, cutting through the operational noise. Unknown number, but the area code was local. Marcus almost declined, but something made him answer. "Colonel Rivera." The voice was elderly, female, unfamiliar. This is Maria Santos. I hope you remember me." The name hit Marcus like ice water. Maria Santos, Diego's partner during his last year with Border Patrol. The agent who'd found his body after the accident, who'd testified at the inquiry, who'd spoken at his funeral about Diego's dedication and integrity. "Mrs. Santos," Marcus managed. "Of course I remember. How are you?" "I'm dying, Colonel. Pancreatic cancer. The doctors say I have maybe 2 months." Marcus closed his eyes, already knowing where this conversation was heading. "I'm calling because I need to tell someone the truth before I go, about Diego, about what really happened to your brother." The desert around Marcus seemed to tilt, the familiar landscape becoming alien and dangerous. "Mrs. Santos, the investigation was thorough. The report was a lie." Her voice was steady, matter of fact. "I helped write it, so I should know." Marcus felt the hard drives burning against his chest, their secret weight suddenly unbearable. Around him, federal agents continued their methodical work, cataloging evidence and building cases, all of them operating under the assumption that truth and justice were aligned. "Diego came to me 3 days before he died," Maria continued. "He'd discovered something about checkpoint protocols, patterns that didn't make sense. Someone was providing inside information to the cartels, someone with high-level access." Marcus's throat was closing, but he forced words through it. "Mrs. Santos, if you have information about my brother's death—" He had evidence, Marcus. Documents, recordings, proof of who was feeding information to El Chapo's organization. He was going to present it to Internal Affairs that Monday, the Monday after Diego's funeral. The presentation that never happened because Diego died on Thursday night, his car rolling 3 times after what witnesses described as a mechanical failure during a routine pursuit. "Who was it?" Marcus whispered, though he already knew. "Your father was a good man in many ways," Maria said, her voice gentle but relentless. "But he'd been taking cartel money for years. Diego found the bank records, traced the payments, connected them to specific operations that had been compromised." Marcus looked across the command site toward the tunnel entrance, where technicians were still documenting the scene that had started this nightmare. In the distance, he could see the memorial park where both his father and brother were buried, their graves separated by barely 50 yards and 20 years of lies. "Why are you telling me this now?" he asked. "Because I saw the news about the tunnel raid, because I know what you probably found down there, and because Diego deserves better than the lie we've all been living with." Marcus closed his eyes, feeling the last threads of his old life snapping one by one. "There's something else," Maria said. "Something I kept. Something Diego gave me for safekeeping the day before he died. The old life was gone. There was no going back now." Marcus stood frozen in the desert heat, Maria Santos's words echoing in his head while federal agents worked around him like ants rebuilding a disturbed hill. The hard drives against his chest felt like they were burning through his tactical vest, their weight tripling with every breath. "What kind of something?" he asked, though his voice sounded distant even to himself. "A safety deposit box key," Maria said, "and instructions. He made me promise that if anything happened to him, I'd give them to you when the time was right." Marcus watched Agent Chen directing her team toward the tunnel entrance, their movements efficient and purposeful. Soon they'd be down there, photographing every surface he'd touched, looking for evidence he'd already stolen. The irony wasn't lost on him. He was now actively obstructing the same kind of investigation that might have saved Diego's life. "Mrs. Santos, I can't—" "You can't what? Hear the truth about your family?" Her voice carried the weight of someone with nothing left to lose. "I kept quiet for 15 years, Marcus. 15 years of watching you carry guilt that wasn't yours to carry." Around the command site, Marcus's team continued their work with military precision. Rodriguez was coordinating with Border Patrol units, establishing a security perimeter. Thompson was briefing local police on traffic control, everyone moving with practiced efficiency, following protocols that Roberto Rivera had helped write. Protocols designed to fail at exactly the right moments. "The bank records Diego found," Marcus said quietly, turning away from the activity around him. "Do you know how much?" "Over $2 million, spread across 20 years, filtered through shell accounts. Your father was very careful, very professional. $2 million. Marcus tried to reconcile that figure with memories of his childhood. Second-hand school clothes, his mother clipping coupons, the family's old Ford that Roberto kept running with junkyard parts and stubborn pride. Where had the money gone? He never lived like he had money, Marcus said. Because he was smart. Most of it went into accounts for you boys. College funds, emergency savings. He told himself he was providing for his family. The words hit Marcus like a physical blow. His West Point education, the one that launched his military career, had that been paid for with cartel money? His wedding, the down payment on his first house, every financial foundation of his adult life suddenly felt contaminated. Marcus, you still there? I'm here. But he wasn't. Not really. He was 15 years in the past, watching his father pin lieutenant's bars on his uniform, the older man's pride unmistakable. Roberto had made a speech that night about honor, about carrying the family name with dignity, about service above self, all while sitting on a fortune built from the deaths of people they'd sworn to protect. The key, Marcus said. Where do I? Not over the phone. Maria's voice sharpened, suddenly cautious. And not yet. There are people still alive who helped cover up Diego's murder. People in positions to hurt your family if they think you're asking the wrong questions. Marcus felt his blood chill. What people? Diego was getting close to something bigger than just your father. A network. American officials, Mexican contacts, money flows that connected to legitimate businesses. Your father was just one piece. The implications crashed over Marcus like a wave. If Diego had uncovered a broader conspiracy, if Roberto was just one asset in a larger network, then the people responsible were still out there, still operational, still dangerous, and Marcus had just stolen evidence that could expose them. Mrs. Santos, if there are others, there are. Her voice dropped to barely above a whisper. And they know about today's raid. They know you found something down there. Marcus's head snapped up, scanning the federal agents working around him with new eyes. Any one of them could be compromised. Any one of them could be reporting back to the same network that had killed Diego. How do you know that? Because 20 minutes ago, someone called me. Someone who knew I was talking to you right now. The phone felt suddenly hot against Marcus's ear. His secure radio, his encrypted communications, the careful operational security he'd built around this mission. None of it mattered if the corruption went high enough. What did they say? They reminded me that dying people can still have accidents, and that your little girl is very pretty in her soccer uniform. Marcus's vision went red around the edges. Someone was watching his family. Someone had seen Elena's text, the photo of Sophia, knew enough about his personal life to make it a weapon. Who was it? I don't know. But Marcus, listen to me carefully. Whatever you found down there, whatever evidence you're carrying, you need to be very careful who you trust with it. The people who killed Diego aren't just still alive, they're still in power. The federal agents were wrapping up their preliminary survey, preparing for the full evidence recovery. Soon they'd want detailed debriefs, complete inventories, total transparency, and somewhere among them might be the person who just threatened his daughter. Marcus ended the call and stared at his phone, Maria Santos's words echoing like gunshots in his head. Sophia in her soccer uniform. Someone was watching his family, cataloging their routines, turning his 8-year-old daughter into leverage. He scrolled to Elena's earlier photo. Sophia beaming in her bright yellow jersey, grass stains on her knees, completely innocent of the darkness closing around their family. The image that had made him smile an hour ago now felt like a target painted on everything he loved. Colonel? Agent Chen approached with a tablet, her expression businesslike. We need your signature on the evidence transfer forms. Marcus looked at the screen, seeing official language about chain of custody and federal jurisdiction. Standard procedure that would put the hard drives directly into the hands of people he could no longer trust. The cursor blinked next to a signature line that might as well have been Sophia's death warrant. There's been a development, Marcus said, not signing. I need 24 hours to coordinate with my superiors before transferring anything to federal custody. Chen's eyes narrowed. Colonel, this is a joint operation. We agreed on immediate handover of all recovered materials. and I'm exercising operational discretion, pending security review. Marcus handed back the tablet unsigned. 24 hours, Agent Chen, that's non-negotiable. He watched her jaw tighten, saw the calculation in her eyes. She could push back, escalate to her superiors, make this a bureaucratic battle. But that would take time, and time was exactly what Marcus needed right now. 24 hours, she said finally. But this conversation isn't over. Marcus nodded and walked toward his command vehicle, feeling Chen's suspicious gaze following him. Once inside, he activated the electronic countermeasures and pulled out a secure phone, one of 3 devices he rotated for truly sensitive communications. The number he dialed belonged to Colonel James Morrison, his mentor from Afghanistan and one of the few people in the military he trusted without reservation. Morrison answered on the second ring. "Rivera, tell me you're not calling with more bad news. Jim, I need a favor. Off the books, no questions asked." A pause. In the background, Marcus could hear the familiar sounds of the Pentagon. Phones ringing, urgent conversations, the constant hum of national security machinery. "How far off the books?" Morrison asked. "Family matter, personal security issue. I need Elena and Sophia moved somewhere safe tonight, without it looking like witness protection." Another pause, longer this time. Morrison had been military intelligence before moving to the Pentagon, and he understood the implications of that kind of request. "Marcus, what have you stepped in? Something that goes back years. Something that might reach higher than I can handle through normal channels." "How high?" Marcus looked through the command vehicle's reinforced windows at the federal agents still working the scene. Any one of them could be compromised. Hell, for all he knew, Morrison's phone was being monitored too. "High enough that I can't use official channels. High enough that my family is at risk just for being related to me." Jesus. Morrison was quiet for almost a full minute. "There's a DoD safe house in Colorado Springs, family retreats for officers under investigation. I can get them there under cover of a marriage counseling program. It was perfect, plausible, private, and completely outside federal law enforcement channels." Marcus felt his first moment of relief since entering the tunnel. "How soon?" "Give me 2 hours. I'll have a team pick them up at your house, make it look routine. Elena will need to pack like she's going away for a week." Marcus closed his eyes, imagining that conversation. "Honey, pack Sophia's things." "No, I can't explain. Yes, there's danger." "No, I don't know when you can come home. Trust me." The same words his father had probably wanted to say 100 times over the years, whenever cartel business made their family a target. The same helpless rage Roberto must have felt every time his 2 lives collided. "There's something else," Marcus said. "I need you to run a background check on someone. Deep dive, everything you can find. Maria Santos, retired Border Patrol, El Paso sector." "Why?" "Because she claims to have information about Diego's death. And because someone threatened her today for talking to me." Morrison's voice hardened. "Marcus, if this is connected to your brother, it's connected to everything." Marcus touched the hard drives through his vest. "Jim, Diego didn't die in an accident. He was murdered because he discovered corruption in Border Patrol. High-level corruption that's still active." The silence stretched so long Marcus thought the call had dropped. When Morrison finally spoke, his voice was careful, measured. "Are you telling me your brother was killed by federal agents? I'm telling you that 15 years ago, someone with serious reach made Diego disappear. And today, that same someone knows I found evidence that could expose them." Marcus watched Agent Chen through his window, saw her talking intensely into her radio. Her body language was tense, frustrated. She was reporting his refusal to transfer evidence, escalating to her superiors, one of whom might be the person who just threatened his daughter. "Get my family somewhere safe," Marcus said. "Everything else can wait." But even as he said it, Marcus knew that nothing could wait. The truth about Diego, about his father, about the network of corruption that had killed his brother. It was all accelerating now, rushing toward a reckoning he wasn't sure he could survive. The line went dead, leaving Marcus staring at his phone in the artificial quiet of the command vehicle. Through the reinforced windows, he could see Agent Chen still talking animatedly into her radio, her gestures growing sharper with each passing moment. She was escalating his refusal up the chain, and soon someone with real authority would be calling to demand the hard drives. Marcus pulled out his laptop and inserted one of the encrypted drives, his hands steadier than they had any right to be. The files loaded slowly, 20 years of financial records painting a picture of corruption so vast it made him dizzy. Shell companies, numbered accounts, payment schedules that corresponded exactly to major cartel operations. But it was the personnel files that stopped his breath entirely. The first photo showed his father in 1998, young and serious in his Border Patrol uniform. The accompanying document was a recruitment assessment, written in clinical language that described Roberto Rivera as an ideal asset candidate. Ambitious, financially motivated, with access to operational intelligence and the moral flexibility to be turned. Marcus scrolled down, his vision blurring as more documents loaded. Bank transfers totaling $2.3 million over 18 years. Detailed reports on Border Patrol operations, including specific timing for patrols and checkpoint schedules. Intelligence summaries that had clearly come from official briefings, passed along to ensure cartel shipments moved safely through designated corridors. And then, at the bottom of the file, a single photograph that made the world tilt sideways. His father shaking hands with a younger man in an expensive suit, both smiling for the camera. The background showed a restaurant Marcus recognized, El Paso's most exclusive steakhouse, the kind of place where federal judges and congressmen made deals over wine that cost more than most people's rent. The man in the suit was Special Agent in Charge William Harrison, currently the FBI's top counter-narcotics official for the Southwest region. Harrison, who had been at Diego's funeral. Harrison, who had personally assured Marcus that every lead would be followed, every angle explored. Harrison, who was now coordinating the federal response to today's tunnel raid from his office in Albuquerque. Marcus's phone buzzed with a text message from an unknown number. "You have something that belongs to me. Let's discuss terms like civilized people. The Camino Real Hotel, room 247. Come alone and bring our mutual friends. You have 1 hour. The mutual friends. The hard drives." A second message followed immediately. "Your family is lovely, by the way. Elena looked very determined at the grocery store this morning. Sophia's soccer practice ends at 4:30, doesn't it?" Marcus felt something cold and sharp unfold in his chest. They weren't just watching, they were flaunting it, demonstrating their reach with surgical precision. Elena's morning routine, Sophia's schedule, every detail of their lives cataloged and weaponized. His secure phone rang again. Morrison's number. "Change of plans," Morrison said without preamble. "I can't use DoD resources. Someone flagged your request, started asking questions about why a border task force commander needed family protection. What kind of someone? High level, Pentagon level. Marcus, whatever you've stumbled into, it has teeth up here too." The scope of it was staggering. Not just local corruption, not just a few bad agents taking cartel money, but a network that reached into the highest levels of federal law enforcement and military intelligence. A system so entrenched that even asking for help triggered automatic countermeasures. "I need you to disappear," Morrison continued. "Tonight. Take your family and go dark until you figure out who you can trust." Marcus looked out at the federal agents wrapping up their preliminary survey. Chen was walking toward his vehicle, her expression grim and determined. Behind her, 3 SUVs with government plates were approaching from the access road. Reinforcements, or something worse. "Too late for that," Marcus said. "They're here." "Marcus." "Jim, if something happens to me, there's evidence. Financial records, personnel files, photographs. Look for Maria Santos, former Border Patrol. She has a key." He ended the call and stepped out of the command vehicle just as Chen reached him, flanked by 6 federal agents in full tactical gear. Their weapons weren't drawn, but hands rested meaningfully on pistol grips. "Colonel Rivera," Chen said, her voice carrying new authority. "I've been instructed to secure all evidence related to this operation immediately. No exceptions, no delays. By whose authority?" Chen smiled, and for the first time since Marcus had met her, the expression looked genuinely pleased. "Special Agent in Charge. Harrison sends his regards," she said. "He's very interested in reviewing everything you found down there, particularly any financial records or personnel files that might have historical significance." The message was clear. They knew exactly what he'd taken, and they were done playing bureaucratic games. Marcus felt the hard drives pressing against his chest, each one a potential death sentence for his family. Around him, the desert stretched endlessly in all directions, offering no escape and no sanctuary. "Harrison wants to discuss terms," Marcus said quietly. Chen's smile widened. "How did you know?" "Because he was photographed shaking hands with my father in 2003, Marcus said, watching Chen's smile falter slightly. "Along with bank records showing payments that correspond to every major cartel shipment through this sector over the past 20 years. Chen's hand moved closer to her sidearm. "Colonel, you're going to accompany us to a secure location where we can discuss this matter properly." Like my brother was taken to a secure location? The words hung in the desert air like a challenge. Marcus saw recognition flicker across Chen's face, not surprise, but the careful calculation of someone whose cover had just been blown. She knew about Diego. Of course she knew. "Your brother was a tragic loss," Chen said, her voice professionally sympathetic. "But his death has nothing to do with current operations, except for the part where he discovered the same corruption I just found. Except for the part where he was murdered for it." Marcus's radio crackled to life with his team's voices as they finished securing the tunnel entrance, completely unaware that their commander was surrounded by federal agents who might be working for the very people they'd been hunting. The normalcy of it, technical updates, equipment inventories, routine communications, felt surreal against the backdrop of 20 years of betrayal being exposed in real time. "Sir, we're ready for the full evidence sweep," came Sergeant Torres's voice through the static. "Should we proceed?" Chen tilted her head, waiting to see how Marcus would respond. 6 agents, hands on weapons, ready to escalate if he made the wrong choice. But Marcus had spent 30 years in the military, and he recognized the rhythm of a tactical situation. They wanted him compliant, not dead. At least not here, not now, not with witnesses. "Negative, Torres," Marcus said into his radio. "Federal agents are taking point on evidence recovery. Maintain perimeter but stand down from tunnel operations." "Copy that, sir." Chen nodded approvingly, but her eyes remained cold. "Wise choice, Colonel. Now, about those historical documents Harrison mentioned." Marcus's phone buzzed with another text. 42 minutes remaining. "Your daughter's practice is running late today. Very dedicated coach." The casual mention of Sophia made something snap inside Marcus's chest. They weren't just watching his family. They were orchestrating their movements, controlling variables, demonstrating absolute power over every person he loved. "Tell Harrison I'll meet him," Marcus said. "But I choose the location." Chen laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "You're not in a position to make demands, Colonel." "Actually, I am." Marcus pulled out his phone and scrolled to a video file, holding the screen where Chen could see it. "Because 30 minutes ago, I uploaded copies of everything to a secured server with automatic release protocols. If I don't check in every 6 hours, 20 years of financial records and personnel files get distributed to every major news outlet, Congressional Oversight Committee, and Inspector General's office in the federal system." It was a bluff, but a convincing one. Marcus had thought about digital deadman switches during his years hunting terrorists who used similar tactics. The technology existed, and Chen's slight hesitation suggested she believed he might have actually implemented it. "He's lying," one of the other agents said, but Chen held up a hand for silence. "Harrison anticipated you might try something like this," she said. "Which is why your family's safety depends entirely on how cooperative you choose to be." The threat was naked now, all pretense of federal authority stripped away. They were criminals with badges, using government resources to protect a cartel network that had been operating for decades. Marcus thought about his father, wondered if Roberto had faced a similar moment. The choice between family safety and moral obligation, between personal survival and public duty. His father had chosen money and silence. Diego had chosen truth and died for it. "The memorial park," Marcus said finally, "where my brother is buried. Harrison can meet me there in 1 hour." Chen's eyes narrowed. "Why there?" "Because it's public, because it's symbolic, and because if he's going to try to justify 20 years of corruption, he can do it in front of Diego's grave. The location would also give Marcus advantages: multiple exit routes, civilian witnesses, and the psychological pressure of conducting their negotiation at the site of Harrison's greatest crime. If Marcus was walking into a trap, at least he'd choose the terrain. "I'll need to confirm with Harrison," Chen said, pulling out her phone. As she stepped away to make the call, Marcus closed his eyes and tried to center himself. In 1 hour, he would face the man who had ordered his brother's death, who had protected a network of corruption that stretched from cartel tunnels to Pentagon offices. The man who was currently using Marcus's own daughter as a hostage to ensure compliance. But for the first time since discovering his father's betrayal, Marcus felt something other than overwhelming despair. He felt the cold, focused clarity that had carried him through combat zones and counterterrorism operations. The enemy had revealed themselves, the battlefield was chosen, and the rules of engagement were finally clear. 20 years of lies were about to end, one way or another. Chen ended her call and walked back with the measured stride of someone delivering an ultimatum. "Harrison agrees to the location," she said, "but he insists on modified terms. You bring the drives, he brings proof that your family remains safe." "Proof?" "Live video feed. Your wife and daughter, unharmed, in a secure location. They stay that way as long as our conversation remains productive." Marcus nodded, knowing he had no choice. Around him, the federal agents maintained their positions, close enough to act, far enough to avoid appearing threatening to any observers. "Professional hostage-takers with government credentials. 1 hour," he said. The drive to Memorial Park felt like traveling through a dream version of El Paso, everything familiar yet fundamentally changed by what he now knew. Streets where he'd grown up, neighborhoods where his father had been respected as a community leader, intersections where Diego had probably passed intelligence to cartel contacts without Marcus ever suspecting. The park occupied 12 acres of carefully maintained green space in a city where water was precious and shade was salvation. Families picnicked under cottonwood trees while children played on equipment donated by the families of fallen Border Patrol agents. It was aggressively normal, deliberately peaceful, which made it perfect for the kind of conversation that could never officially happen. Marcus parked near the memorial wall and walked toward Diego's section. The bronze plaque was smaller than he'd always thought it should be: Agent Diego Rivera, 1978 to 2008. Faithful service, ultimate sacrifice. 30 words to summarize a life that had been cut short for discovering the truth. Harrison was already waiting, standing respectfully several feet from Diego's marker. He looked exactly like Marcus remembered from the funeral. Silver hair, expensive suit, the kind of practiced solemnity that came from decades of attending burials for agents who died in the line of duty, some of whom, Marcus now realized, had probably been killed on Harrison's orders. Marcus Harrison's voice carried genuine warmth, which somehow made everything worse. "I'm sorry it's come to this." "Are you?" Marcus moved to stand directly in front of Diego's plaque, forcing Harrison to face both brothers simultaneously. "Or are you just sorry I found out?" Harrison pulled out a tablet and turned the screen toward Marcus. The video showed Elena and Sophia in what looked like a hotel room, both sitting on a bed while Elena read aloud from one of Sophia's school books. They appeared unharmed but confined, with the subtle tension that came from knowing they were being watched. "They're comfortable," Harrison said, "and they'll remain so as long as we can reach an understanding." Marcus forced himself to look away from his family and focus on the man who'd orchestrated 20 years of betrayal. Up close, Harrison looked older than his 65 years, with the kind of bone-deep exhaustion that came from maintaining multiple identities for decades. The federal agent and the cartel asset, each role requiring constant performance, constant vigilance against discovery. "My father recruited you," Marcus said, "or you recruited him." It was mutual, actually. Harrison sat down on a nearby bench, gesturing for Marcus to join him. "Roberto needed money for your mother's medical bills. I needed reliable intelligence on Border Patrol operations. We helped each other." The casual tone was obscene, reducing his father's corruption and his mother's suffering to a simple business transaction. Marcus remained standing, using height as psychological advantage. "And when Diego found out?" "Diego was idealistic. Like you." Harrison's voice carried what might have been genuine regret. He couldn't see the bigger picture. Couldn't understand that sometimes compromise serves a greater good. What greater good? Harrison gestured toward the city sprawling beyond the park boundaries. Stability, predictability, violence that stays contained to acceptable levels. Do you have any idea what El Paso would look like if the cartels decided to make it a war zone? If they stopped using established tunnels and started improvising? It was the logic of collaboration, the rationalization that had sustained traders throughout history. Better to manage evil than fight it. Better to profit from corruption than risk the chaos of resistance. You killed my brother for that philosophy. I made a difficult choice to protect thousands of families. Harrison's voice hardened, just like the choice you're facing now. Your family's safety balanced against abstract principles that won't bring Diego back. Marcus touched the hard drives through his vest, feeling their weight like physical evidence of his father's sins and Diego's sacrifice. Everything that mattered was compressed into those small devices. Financial records that could destroy careers, personnel files that could send dozens of federal agents to prison, evidence that could finally bring justice for his brother. Or he could surrender it all to save Elena and Sophia. "Show me the terms," Marcus said. Harrison smiled with genuine relief. "I knew you'd be reasonable. Your father always said you were the practical one." The mention of Roberto felt like a slap, but Marcus kept his expression neutral as Harrison outlined the deal that would trade his family's life for 20 years of silence. Around them, families continued their picnics, while two men negotiated the price of truth at a memorial to the dead. The terms were simple. Marcus would hand over the drives and disappear into early retirement with a comfortable pension and his family's safety guaranteed. The tunnel would be sealed. The investigation would conclude that El Chapo's network had been successfully disrupted, and everyone would move forward with their lives intact. "Except the families destroyed by the drugs you helped move," Marcus said. Harrison's expression didn't change. Acceptable losses in service of a larger stability. Marcus looked down at Diego's grave marker, remembering his brother's laugh, his stubborn idealism, his absolute faith that the system could be fixed if good people just worked hard enough. Diego had died believing in something worth dying for. Now Harrison was asking Marcus to declare that belief worthless. "I need to see them," Marcus said, "in person, before I decide." Harrison studied him for a long moment, then made a call. 20 minutes later, a black SUV pulled into the parking lot. Marcus watched Elena and Sophia step out, flanked by two men who looked like federal agents but carried themselves like cartel enforcers. Elena's eyes found his across the distance, and he saw her slight nod. They were unharmed but understood the situation. Sophia broke away from her escort and ran toward him. Marcus caught her in his arms, feeling her small body trembling against his chest. "Dad, what's happening?" she whispered. "It's going to be okay, mija," he said, the lie tasting like ash in his mouth. Elena approached more slowly, her nurse's training evident in how she assessed Marcus for injuries, emotional and physical. "What did you find?" she asked quietly. "Evidence," Marcus said, "about your grandfather, about Uncle Diego." Elena's face went pale, but she nodded. She'd suspected something for years. Too many inconsistencies in the family stories, too much money appearing at convenient moments, too many questions that Roberto had deflected with charm and distraction. Harrison cleared his throat. "Touching reunion. But we need a decision, Colonel." Marcus straightened, keeping one arm around Sophia while taking Elena's hand. He looked at his family, then at Diego's marker, then at Harrison's expectant face. "No," he said simply. Harrison's smile faded. "I'm sorry?" "No deal." Marcus pulled out the hard drives. "These go public. All of it. My father's corruption, your network, Diego's murder, every detail. Then you're condemning your family to—" "I'm saving them," Marcus interrupted. "From living the same lie that destroyed my father and killed my brother." He turned to Elena. "Take Sophia to the car, call Morrison, his number's in my phone, tell him to implement Protocol 7. Elena hesitated. "Marcus, trust me." She did, leading Sophia away, while Harrison watched with growing alarm. When they were out of earshot, Marcus faced him again. "Here's what's really going to happen," Marcus said. "In 30 seconds, this park is going to be surrounded by Army Rangers and FBI hostage rescue. The real FBI, not your people. Morrison's been tracking your communications since I called him. Your network just became evidence in a federal terrorism investigation. Harrison's hand moved toward his jacket but froze as red laser dots appeared on his chest from 3 different directions. Military snipers, positioned during the family reunion distraction. You see, William, you made one crucial mistake, Marcus continued. You assumed I was my father, that I'd choose comfort over conscience, money over duty. But Diego taught me better than that. The SUVs arrived with military precision, 8 vehicles disgorging 40 federal agents and Army personnel. Harrison's escorts were on the ground in handcuffs within seconds, their weapons secured, their communications jammed. As Harrison was read his rights, Marcus knelt beside Diego's grave one final time. "We got them, hermano," he whispered. "All of them." 6 months later, Marcus stood in the same spot holding a different kind of document. The congressional commendation was symbolic. The real satisfaction came from the newspaper headlines documenting Harrison's conviction, the dismantling of the corruption network, and the unprecedented cooperation between reformed law enforcement agencies. Elena joined him, reading over his shoulder. 37 indictments, including 2 federal judges and a Pentagon procurement officer. Diego would be proud. Sophia ran up carrying flowers for her uncle's grave. At 9 years old, she still didn't fully understand why her grandfather had done terrible things, but she grasped that her father had chosen to be different, to be better. Marcus watched his daughter arrange the flowers with serious concentration. She had Elena's precision and Diego's sense of justice, but something uniquely her own, a faith in goodness that hadn't been tested by betrayal or loss. That faith was worth protecting, worth fighting for, worth the sleepless nights and the career change and the knowledge that some truths could never be unknown. The desert wind carried the scent of rain, promising relief from the endless heat. Marcus took his family's hands and walked toward whatever came next, leaving Diego's memory finally at peace.